What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Not So Stupid podcast. Today, we are going to be breaking down the complete core training curriculum. So, your all inclusive guide to having a nice, strong, and aesthetic core. So, a nice defined six pack, the toned midsection everyone is after, especially this time of year as we get closer to summer. We'll be breaking down all of that. So we're going to go through the hierarchy of core training, what the most important principles of core training are, the different exercises you should try to include in your training program to help optimize not only the strength of your core, but the strength and progression of your other lifts as well, because they're going to be directly related, and how you can attack your core from all different angles to help get that nice lean midsection look that you're after. So that is going to be basically the entire podcast, going through each aspect of those. But before we get into it, I want to say two things. One, it's important to recognize that while six pack and abs have become synonymous with core, it is only one aspect of your core. The core is much more, it has many more parts than just the abs itself. Your core is, your rectus abdominis, which is your abs, your external and internal obliques, which are going to be the muscles on the side of your abs, that are going to range from the bottom of your chest all the way down to your hips. It's basically what covers your ribs up and gives you those angled striations that most people like to see. It's also going to be your rectus spina, which is the muscles that go up and down your spinal column from the backside and sides there. And then there's also going to be your diaphragm, your glutes, your glute medius in particular, and your pelvic floor muscles. All of those are going to be tied into what your core actually is. Now, we're not going to focus too much on those other ones because they will get worked indirectly when we talk about the different principles of core training. But it is important just to recognize and understand that your core isn't just the abs that you see on the front of your body. It's all of these muscles. And the goal of your core, obviously we like to use our core and make the goal of our core to be looking good, but the goal of your core is much more than that. It's actually very vital in maintaining your spine health and maintaining your postural integrity, right? So having a strong core is directly related with improved posture. It's directly related with less chronic injuries, particularly low back pain. One of the main reasons people experience chronic low back pain is because of a weak core, among a couple other things, but that is one of the top three reasons I would say most people have chronic low back pain. So strengthening your core will lead to less injuries and good injury mitigation, as well as improved posture. So good, strong torso placement. It's not just about bringing your shoulders back, it's about having good rib placement in reference to your pelvis, and keeping that integrity throughout the day, no matter how you sit, how you stand, or what's happening to you. And it also directly translates to improved performance in the gym. So whether that is through your cardio, through sprinting and running, or through your lifting, you'll be able to lift more with a strong core because you won't need to waste energy trying to stabilize your core. You'll have that strong foundation, and when you have that strong foundation, when your torso is able to stay stable and upright through your squats and your deadlifts or your bench or your overhead press, you're better able to recruit the muscles needed to activate that movement better and push more weight as a whole, because the core is going to be the foundation of all of these movements. If your torso is shaky, you can't transfer energy as well to your glutes and hamstrings if you're doing a deadlift. You need a good strong torso from your shoulders to your hips. That needs to be stable in place. It can't rotate, it can't be flexing excessively, because that's wasted energy trying to navigate down to the glutes and hamstrings. So embracing and strengthening that core is going to be vital in helping you lift more, which directly translates into better muscle recruitment and better muscle development, as well as more calories burned and more fat loss. So there's a lot of benefits to having a strong core beyond just looking good. Obviously, looking good is going to be one of our main priorities, but important to understand that it's way more than that, and that training your core from all these different angles and working in functional core training exercises will be important in every aspect of your life and your training beyond just how your body looks. So that was the first thing I wanted to say about core training. It's more than just your abs, but we will focus on and touch on abs specifically and your anterior core, the front aspect of your core. more in depth as we go through this hierarchy. The second thing I want to say is that we've mentioned this in the podcast a few times, particularly in the Q&As, but you cannot spot reduce. Training your core specifically, doing crunches on end, doing any kind of core exercise that we're going to be talking about today doesn't mean that you will lose fat in that area. All these exercises are going to target the muscles in your core, but they're not going to target the fat in your core. So they will help with building, creating hypertrophy in your core muscles. So your ab muscles will actually grow in size and get a good amount of shape to them as you train them, which will help them show better as you lean out. But you'll need to have a certain amount, you'll need to lose a certain amount of fat in order for them to show properly. Building them and targeting them and working on their hypertrophy is going to be helpful to make them show faster, but it's not going to be the only thing you need to worry about. Training your core alone isn't going to lead to a toned midsection, right? It's going to be good diet and exercise, generally good diet and exercise. You can't train your way to a six-pack. You need to eat your way to a six-pack as well. You need to have a good diet that is indicative of a toned physique, of losing fat, of holding a low body fat percentage. So that's going to be important to recognize as we go through this. There's no such thing as spot training, but training your core is going to help you get a six-pack / a toned midsection faster, as well as helping you improve your posture to give you that toned, leaned look more effectively. For a lot of people, their spinal positioning causes them to have a not so toned physique in their midsection, or a not as aesthetically pleasing physique. So training your core properly will lead to that as well. So I wanted to cover those two things first and foremost. But now that we got those out of the way, let's go into the hierarchy of core training. So these are going to be the different principles of core training that you want to include into your training program. And I'm going to label them out from most important to least important. I don't like saying least important because it's still valuable, but it's definitely like foundational aspect of core training to not so foundational. And then going through them one at a time, talking about what they look like in your training, how to incorporate them, and example exercises for those as well. So starting off, the first aspect of this hierarchy, and I want you to try and imagine a pyramid here, and we're going to be talking about the base of the pyramid first and then going upward as we list these. The first one is going to be breathing, which is more specifically referencing diaphragmatic breathing, so breathing in through your diaphragm. The next one is going to be bracing. The next level beyond that is going to be anti-movement exercises. Then it's going to be flexion-based exercises, and then it's going to be loaded carries. So going through them one more time from bottom to top, foundation to peak, it's going to be breathing, bracing, anti-movement exercises, flexion-based exercises, and loaded carries. Now, for a lot of people, they're going to be surprised that breathing is going to be the foundational aspect here, because it's very often underlooked. You wouldn't consider breathing any type of core exercise, but when you learn how to actually breathe properly and use your diaphragm effectively and train that intensely, you will light up your core like no other. I've recently been doing Flowbility based off of, if you watched the watched or listened to the podcast interview with Coach Chronic or Coach Karan a couple weeks ago, he talked about Flowbility. I've been starting that, and a lot of what we're doing for our core training is diaphragmatic breathing. And just focusing on the breathing alone wears me out, wears my core out. My abs are sore for a day or two at a time, and I'm not even exaggerating about that. So learning how to do this effectively can be a powerful tool for you as you go through this core training progression. Now, one thing I do want to say is that you don't necessarily need to go through this in this order. Like, it's not like you need to master diaphragmatic breathing in order to be able to do a plank, in order to be able to do a Pallof press. You can do these other exercises and still work on them independently of each other. But if you truly want to optimize your core, if you truly want to get the most out of it, and every exercise after that as well, starting with the bottom and working your way up is going to be ideal, especially if you do it throughout the week, right? So going through this one at a time, we're going to start with diaphragmatic breathing. And again, there's a little anecdote that I want to share that I read recently, which I don't know if it's true or not, but it is something that I read that resonated really well on this topic. And it was a story about a man who saw a Buddhist monk teaching these 5-year-olds how to breathe, just sitting down in a little circle like a kindergarten teacher would read to kids. This man was teaching these children how to breathe properly. And this guy went up to the monk and he asked him, "Why are you teaching them how to breathe? That seems kind of silly." And the monk said, "This is one of the things, these are one of the skills that you go through your entire life doing, but you never actually learn how to control it. You never actually learn how to do it properly. And when you don't have that power, when you don't have that skill set mastered, you aren't able to control yourself as well. You're not able to control your emotions as well. You'll be angry and you'll have short breath. Whenever you're sad or angry or any kind of negative emotion, overwhelmed, stress, you'll be hyperventilating and breathing really short. You'll be, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And they don't have that awareness to slow their breath down and put themselves in a different position. And likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, as I just said, when you are in a resting state, when you are in a recovering state and a peaceful state, you're able to breathe slower, you're able to breathe with more control, and you're able to change your entire mood just by changing how you breathe. And likewise, you're able to develop more strength by understanding how to breathe and when to breathe. So diaphragmatic breathing is very central. Again, this is why it's the foundational aspect of core training, why it's the bottom layer of this hierarchy, to helping you develop this strength. And it's very simple at its base. And if you're sitting down right now listening to this, or if you're walking and listening to this, I encourage you to stop walking and stand up straight. Or if you're sitting down, just sit up straight and practice this with me. Diaphragmatic breathing is basically where you're going to be breathing into your stomach as opposed to breathing into your lungs. So normally, if you inhale through your nose, most people that aren't aware of diaphragmatic breathing will inhale through their nose and puff up their lungs, they puff up their chest will expand, right? And that doesn't actually brace your core at all. It's just getting oxygen into your body, which obviously is valuable. But if we want to get the most out of our breathing, our inhales and our exhales, inhaling through our nose and expanding your lower stomach, if you want to put your hands on your lower stomach, just around the belly button, maybe a little lower, closer to the pelvis, inhale deeply for 2 to 3 seconds and try to expand your diaphragm, expand your lower stomach as wide as you can. So you should feel that stretching across your midsection, and then exhaling through your mouth and retaining your or bringing back in your stomach. That will be how you diaphragmatically breathe. You're using your diaphragm to breathe in that way. So when you do this, when you're exhaling in particular, you're stabilizing your spine in a much better way. You're activating your core in a very strong way. And when you exhale, especially if you're training this directly, I want to encourage you to exhale very strongly. This is where you'll feel it the most, especially if you have your hands across your midsection. You'll feel your core tighten up really well when you exhale strongly. And I'm not talking about exhaling where you want to blow out one birthday candle. You want to exhale to where you're imagining blowing out an entire fire. You're blowing out an entire bonfire with just your mouth. You got to blow really hard and really tighten up your core when you do this. And just focusing on gathering as much air as you can when you inhale, expanding it as far as you can, and then blowing as hard as you can when you exhale. That is going to be the basis of what diaphragmatic breathing is. And this is where, again, a lot of core stability comes in. Your rib cage gets put in a strong position when you exhale and diaphragmatically breathe. This is how you should be breathing and using your breath when you squat and deadlift. When you're coming up from your lifts, you want to exhale, or Valsalva. There's 2 different methods for this, but you want to exhale and have that strong torso position, that strong core position, that strong ribcage position, so that your spine is holding its own. It's in that sturdy position, and you're not putting yourself in a compromised position that would lead to injury. So the way you would practice this and when you would practice this is twofold. So to practice for both of these situations, you're going to lay on your back. This is going to be the easiest way to start. Lay on your back. you're going to have your feet elevated, so on some sort of surface, a chair, a bench, a stability ball, whatever you want to use, and you're going to focus on breathing the same way that we just practiced. You're going to inhale through your nose, expand your lower stomach as far as you can, and make it as big as possible. And hold that for a couple seconds, and then breathe out through your mouth afterwards. So practicing just that, having that control and using your breath in that manner, using it to, instead of puff up your lungs, to puff up your lower stomach. And you'll want to do this in two different instances. One is in preparation of your workout. So before you do your priming exercises and your activation exercises, you want to practice this diaphragmatic breathing. So before you actually start with, probably when you're doing stretches or when you just get to the gym, this is a good time to do like 2 sets of 5 breaths and get into the habit of breathing properly and getting into that routine. Because when you lift heavy, and this is actually why lifting belts are helpful, you want to feel this expansion. You want to put that pressure in your stomach so that, again, your spine is strong, your rib cage is in a good strong place, your core is activated, and you can push the weight as well as you can. You're stable. The belt is there when you lift heavy to remind you to expand your diaphragm. The belt isn't there so that you can squeeze it as tight as possible and keep your back in a good position. The belt is there to remind you and to have and to cue you to expand your breath so that you fill up the space of the belt. You want to expand your stomach to push against the belt. You have something to push off of. Just like we just talked about having your hands to push off of when you're practicing, the belt is there so that you remember and can feel yourself pushing and breathing into your stomach and against the belt. That's why you would use a belt. Just for everyone that's out there, you use a belt to help you focus on your diaphragmatic breathing. It's not there. It doesn't actually help you stabilize anything. It's not something to rely on. It's there to help you breathe and brace properly for when you do any of those lifts, because sometimes it'll be hard to cue your breath, cue your breathing properly when you're lifting really heavy weight, because there's a lot to worry about because the weight on your back is really heavy, or the weight you're going to lift off the ground is really heavy. So that belt is there to help remind you to breathe into it. So that would be the first time you would use it, is pre-training, especially for heavy lifts, especially if you're going to use a belt. You're going to want to prime your breathing in a way to be prepared for when you do your heavy lifts. The second time you would do this is after your training. This slow diaphragmatic breathing is actually a good way to put yourself in a rest and digest state, in a good recovery state, a parasympathetic state. So for a lot of my clients, I will have and program, depending on their level of training. This is especially helpful for advanced lifters and very intense trainers. I definitely recommend ending your workout, ending your cardio session, ending your run, your sprint session, whatever it is, with diaphragmatic breathing to help relax your body, get the oxygen it needs to help you recover and calm down your mind and your heart rate, to again put you in that rest and digest state to kickstart the recovery process. So those are going to be the two instances where they're going to be most helpful. Of course, you can always practice this at any time. Again, if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this while sitting down or while walking, definitely encourage you to practice diaphragmatic breathing and get in the hang of it. This is a very invaluable skill to use, and you can use this and it'll help you in, again, managing your stress, putting you in a good, comfortable, de-stressed position, and just making your life a lot easier. So that's going to be the first aspect of core training. The diaphragmatic breathing is going to is going to tie into all of these other aspects. When you can diaphragmatically breathe well, you'll do all of these other exercises that much better. But now getting into the next level of the hierarchy of core training, we're going to be talking about bracing, which is another way to call an anti-extension exercise, right? So anti-extension exercises are exercises where you want to avoid extension of the spine. Spinal extension is going to look like when you puff up your chest and you have your rib cage pointing forward, and the back of your back is kind of curved forward as well. Your shoulders are going backwards, your ribs are forward, and then your hips are back. That's extension of the spine. Whereas flexion of the spine is kind of your crunching exercise, like where you're doing a sit-up, where you're bringing your shoulders to your chest and your stomach. Extension is going to be the opposite. It's opening yourself up and bringing your thoracic spine / ribs forward. That puts your spine in a compromised position. You're at a very weak stage there because each individual vertebrae is supporting itself, as opposed to all the vertebrae and all the muscles around the vertebrae supporting each other to create a strong structure. Without good bracing and good extension, you're going to put yourself in, again, a compromised position while you do any of your lifts. This is especially apparent with overhead pressing. I see this the most with people that overhead press really heavy and don't have good core stability or good core control. They will press the weight over their head and then their entire rib cage flares forward. Their whole back is curved forward as opposed to being a straight line from shoulder to butt, shoulder to hips. You don't want that. You want to have a good neutral spine at all times throughout all of your lifts, because again, spine is going to be the base of your body. If your spine is in compromised position, if you're in excessive extension often, you're going to get a lot of low back pain. You're going to get shoulder pain too in some instances, and you put yourself in a spot in extreme situations to get a hernia, a herniated disc or anything like that. So get ahead of the game and try not to do that. The most common and the best anti-extension exercises are going to be planks and plank variations. So this is going to be how to do a plank properly and what you want to look for when you do a plank. So when you do a plank, you're going to have your forearms on the floor and you're going to have your toes on the floor. The goal of the plank isn't just to stay in this position as long as possible. The goal of a plank is going to be to keep your rib cage curved upward toward the ceiling as long as you can and squeezing your core as long as you can. It's not just about holding yourself there and putting all the weight on your shoulders and letting your stomach sag to the floor. That's not a plank. You're not actually doing anything there. You're not bracing. You're just hanging on, essentially, right? We want to be actively bracing the entire time we are doing a plank. So you're going to dig your forearms into the ground, push your shoulder blades forward to get a rounded position in your upper back. You're going to pull your rib cage in, suck it in nice and tight, and get your belly button to the ceiling, essentially, because the ceiling's going to be over you. It's going to be behind your back. You want to pull that in, suck it in, and hold that position as tight as you can for 30 to 60 seconds. If you do this properly and you actually do it as tight as you can, no matter what your level of experience is in the gym, this is going to be hard for you. You're going to be challenged doing this, right? If you can do a 2-3 minute plank and not break a sweat, you're not doing planks properly. You need to be excessively bracing and squeezing tightly and forcing tension into your abdominal region, forcing your ribs inward / upward toward the ceiling, and curving your shoulder blades forward. So to create a curve in your back upward. So if you're looking from someone that's planking, if you're looking at someone that's planking sideways, from their head to their butt is going to be kind of a curved hill upward toward the ceiling. So it shouldn't sag downward. It shouldn't be like a bowl shape. It should be more like an upward, like an upside down U, right? That's what I'm trying to get at here. And that's what you really want to do. The idea is, again, to avoid extension. You want to keep your rib cage tucked in as hard as you can. You can level this position, you can level this movement up by adding a weight on your back when you do planks, because the weight is going to force you or push you toward extending your spine. It's going to try to push your ribs to the floor. And to create more anti-extension, you're going to have to resist more resistance, more weight, right? By flexing your rib cage to the ceiling and holding that position just as long with more tension and more force. So that's one way to level that up. Other variations of extension are going to be hollow holds and dead bugs, which are pretty similar to each other, just slightly different positions. These are going to be kind of reverse planks. You're going to be laying on your back instead of holding yourself up facing the floor. You're going to be facing the ceiling, back on the floor. With hollow holds, your arms and your legs are fully extended, so you're in a straight line. And again, this is kind of like what I mentioned with the overhead position, where your rib cage is going to naturally flare upwards to the ceiling, but you want to pull your rib cage down to the floor because you want to flatten out your rib cage. And again, now you want to make kind of a bowl shape with your body. From your hands, the tip of your hands to the tip of your toes, it should be kind of curved to the floor, round part to the floor. And this is, again, putting you against extension. You're flexing yourself and keeping your rib cage in a strong, sturdy position. And you can challenge yourself with this as well by putting weights in your hands or weights on your feet, or having someone try to push your feet down slightly, not excessively. But again, holding that position as best as you can and fully bracing. Those are going to be the two main variations of that. The way you would program this into your program is, one, this is great as a priming exercise to do before any major lift while you're doing the other priming exercises. So if you're doing glutes, I'm sorry, not glutes, if you're doing deadlifts, for instance, doing something like a glute bridge variation with a plank is a good combo to do before you deadlift, to activate those muscles properly, to put yourself in a strong position, and have your body working the way that it should be working before going into your main lift. You can also superset this throughout the workout whenever you see fit. For a lot of people, I like to superset deadlifts with planks because for most people, if they have lower back pain and they aren't strong enough with their core to have a strong deadlift, and they feel it in their lower back more than their glutes or hamstring, this just reinforces the idea to maintain that anti-extension position and have strong bracing, so that every set of deadlifts that you do, you'll have been bracing your core in between to keep yourself in that strong and stable position while you deadlift. So that's one way to use it. You can also just add it to the end of your workout as a good finisher to really burn out your core and get the most out of it there. So that is going to be bracing / anti-extension exercises. Plank variations, plank holds, hollow holds, they're all going to be different kinds of holds where you're avoiding extension of the spine. You're keeping your rib cage tucked in, you're keeping your shoulder blades forward to some degree, and you're keeping your pelvis tucked underneath you. The next kind of exercise is going to be anti-movement exercises. And we already talked about anti-extension, so we're going to talk about the other two right now, and that is going to be anti-lateral flexion and anti-rotation. So lateral flexion of the spine is where, if you're standing straight up and your hands are to your side, if you were to lean to one side trying to touch your right foot with your right hand, you're kind of like tilting your head to the right, and then likewise lateral flexion to the left is going to be the opposite. That's going to be lateral flexion. Anti-lateral flexion means that there's going to be a load trying to push you to one side, trying to pull you down to one side, but you're trying to maintain a straight posture. So you're resisting lateral flexion. Likewise with rotation, a normal rotation exercise is going to be Russian twists. You're rotating your shoulders to be in a different position than your hips. With an anti-rotation exercise, you want your shoulders and your hips to be facing the same direction the entire time. So those are going to be the goals with lateral flexion and the goals with, anti-lateral flexion and the goals with anti-rotation. Two of the best exercises for each of those that I really like a lot for anti-lateral flexion is going to be side planks. Side planks are really good anti-lateral flexion exercises. So, excuse me. So side plank, for those that don't know, is a plank on your side. You're going to have your one elbow on the ground and both feet on the ground, but your torso is going to be facing the wall as opposed to the floor. So you're going to be sideways on this. One arm is going to be in the air straight above you, and you want to keep your hips up in a straight line. So your shoulders to your toes should be one straight line. You don't want your hips to sag. That's lateral flexion when your hips sag. You want to keep them upward as best as you can. This is going to help bring in your side and tighten that up for those people that are looking to improve their posture and improve the flatness of their sides. That's going to be what you want to aim for, is sucking in your oblique, holding that position and bringing your core in. And actively bracing that the entire time. So that is one form of anti-lateral flexion, is side planks and side plank variations. The other one is going to be a offset barbell hold. This is one I like, or you could do an offset dumbbell hold. And what that means is, if you were to stand straight up and hold a barbell at thigh level, right? You're just standing up and holding a barbell right in front of you, and you load just one side of the barbell with plates. So you put 10 pounds on one side and then leave the other side empty. Now you're going to naturally want to lean to one side, just like a seesaw would, but you're trying to do anti-lateral flexion. So you're bracing yourself to stop leaning to one side, to stop flexing laterally. So you would stand straight up with this barbell with the weight on one side and just hold this position for as long as you can, keeping your rib cage tucked in, keeping your shoulders square with your hips. They're both at the same degree, and keeping your head straight. Everything from your head to your hips should be one straight line when you do this. And for both of these, the side plank and the lateral flexion, or side plank and the offset barbell hold, you're going to do it for a set time for both sides. So you can do 30 seconds, take a 30-second break, and then do 30 seconds on the other side. Likewise, offset barbell hold, you can do the weights on the right side of you for 30 seconds, pause for 30 seconds, and then put the weights on the left side and hold that for 30 seconds before you take another break. That would be 2 anti-lateral flexion exercises. Palloff press is an anti-rotation exercise that I really, really like, and I highly encourage everyone to incorporate. This is also one, I'll get into this later in terms of when I would program it. But for those that don't know, Palloff press is going to be a exercise where you're standing up straight or kneeling, but you're kneeling tall. So your hips are extended forward and your shoulders are nice and good tall posture with that. And you have a load to the right or left side of you. So you're either going to have a resistance band tied to something to the right side of you, or you're going to have a cable machine to the right of you that is fully, you already pulled the cable out of it for. And what you're going to do is you're going to have this weight in front of your chest, and you're going to extend your arms directly in front of you. And when you have your arms directly in front of you like that, the band or the pulley system, the cable system, is going to try and twist you to the right. They're trying to turn your shoulders away from your hips. They're going to try to get them out of line with each other. But you are going to try and rotate yourself into that position, hold that position, and resist rotation. So again, the goal here is to keep your shoulders and hips in line with each other so that you're not twisting. This is a really good oblique burner and just ab workout as well, but mostly on the obliques. And excuse me. Another one that is a good anti-rotation exercise that I like to use is actually incorporated with a lot of lifts. So it's going to be something like a staggered dumbbell row, where you have 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, you're leaning forward, and you're rowing a dumbbell or a landmine or a cable to your side. Because there's only a load on one side, your body's going to want to twist, but you're going to want to resist that twisting. So it's working 2 muscle groups at the same time. It's your core and your back and your biceps, of course. Excuse me. But the idea is resisting that rotation is going to be the same regardless. So this is one way to incorporate it functionally into your training. Still work out the primary lift that you're trying to lift. In this instance, a pulling exercise, your back, and also work on your core at the same time. So with all of these exercises, they can be incorporated anywhere in the program. So anti-lateral flexion and anti-rotation. I do like to use them as supersets in the middle of the program. I definitely like to use them, especially Palloff presses, just like planks, as primers for a lot of the main lifts, particularly squats and deadlifts. And lateral flexion as well. I do like to use that as a primer for any kind of dumbbell workout as well. And yeah, you could use it as a finisher to any of your workouts as well. So finishing off, if you're doing an ab finisher at the end of your workout, having a plank with a Palloff press with a side plank or an offset barbell hold is a really good circuit that can just light your core on fire, honestly. Highly recommend it if you haven't done that before. But those are the first 3 levels of core training. The next one, right? So we covered diaphragmatic breathing, we covered bracing, and we covered anti-movement exercises. The next one is going to be flexion-based exercises. And these are the most known exercises, right? These are the most straightforward exercises. It's going to be your sit-ups, it's going to be your crunches, it's going to be your bicycles, your knees to chest, any reverse crunches, any of those things, okay? And what I want to say is, when you're doing these exercises, it's very important not just to go through the motions, but to feel what you're doing. That's basically the theme of this entire thing, is to not just hold yourself in position, like we said with planks. We don't want to just sag our body. We want to actively be bracing. And likewise, you don't want to just do sit-ups and hurt your back. A lot of people will feel their back before they feel their abs when they do sit-ups, but really it's all about compressing the rib cage and squeezing your body inward and making a big round curve in your back. So you're really crunching yourself as tight as you can. You're squeezing your abs as close together as possible. If you want to imagine your abs when you're standing straight up, as an open book, you essentially want to close it as best as you can, closing it in the sense of bringing your chest to your knees / bringing your chest to your hips, right? And that's going to crunch the abdominals as best as it can, just like you would with a bicep. You can't just do a half rep bicep curl. Well, you could, but what I'm trying to say is you want to go through an entire range of motion. You want to bring your forearm to your shoulder and extend back outward again. You don't want to just flex your wrist a couple times and call that a day. That's usually what happens with people, is they'll flex their wrist, essentially, metaphorically speaking, with sit-ups and crunches and variations like that, and not actually use their abs properly. You want to truly flex your spine and get a curve in your back and get a curve in your rib cage. You want to bring it close to you and feel the contraction as best as you can. Quality over quantity with all of these different exercises for your core training. So there's going to be two types of flexion exercises. There's going to be superior and inferior flexion exercises. There's going to be flexion exercises for your upper abs and flexion exercises for your lower abs. For your upper abs, those are going to be things like crunches and sit-ups, like we talked about, and different variations of those. So snail sit-ups, where it's basically a really slow crunch, and things of that nature, where you're bringing your chest and shoulders toward your lower body. So crunching, you're bringing your shoulders up and trying to reach your knees, trying to reach your hips, like we mentioned earlier. The opposite of that, inferior flexion exercises, where you're working your lower abs, you're doing the opposite. You're bringing your knees and lower body toward your chest and upper body. So that would look like a reverse crunch, where you're laying on the floor, and instead of bringing your chest upward, your chest stays on the floor, and you're crunching your knees toward your chest, and your hips come off the floor. Another good way to visualize this is the hanging knee raises, which a lot of people can better visualize. When you're hanging straight up, your chest stays in the same position, but you're bringing your lower body upward and you're trying to get your knees to your chest. That's going to be the same idea. That's the reverse crunch idea you want to mimic on the floor. Those are going to be the ones that target your lower abs. Likewise, another example of that could be mountain climbers. Mountain climbers are very basic exercise that also target the same exact way when you do it properly. The important thing with the inferior flexion exercises is going to be how you flex your pelvis, okay? As it's not just bringing your knees upward. If you do that repeatedly, you might just feel your hips getting tight. You might feel your hip flexors getting tight. You want to really work your lower abs. You got to curve your pelvis, curve your butt upward, and let it leave the ground, and leave that neutral spine position. So with all of these anti-movement exercises that we've been talking about to this point, planks, parallel presses, things like that, you're trying to maintain a strong, stable spine the entire time. With flexion-based exercises, you're actively bending your spine. So you actually want to curve your spine as much as possible to load your upper and lower abs properly. So that's going to be the main differentiator between these two. You want to really pick your pelvis off the floor, or pull your rib cage forward toward your lower body as you do this. Otherwise, if you're doing sit-ups improperly, you're going to be feeling it in your lower back because you're not activating your upper abs properly. If you're doing knees to chest or reverse crunches improperly, you're going to feel it in your hip flexors more than you're going to feel it in your lower abs. So just being mindful of that and understanding that is going to be very key here. But these same exact thing, I like to incorporate flexion-based exercises mostly on lower body day. I don't like to incorporate it as a warm-up in the priming phase. That's going to be mostly used for anti-movement exercises because, again, we want a strong, stable spine before we lift our heavy lifts of the day. Flexion-based exercises are going to be best as supersets toward the end of a workout. So like supersetting with isolation exercises like arms or hamstring curls or things like that, or as, its own circuit at the end of the day. So pushing these off toward the end of the day and or giving them their own little 20-minute workout on a separate day entirely is going to be where these will be best. Again, I like them more on lower body days as opposed to upper body days, just because it's just good to rebalance your spine essentially. So I usually program these kind of sit-up / flexion based exercises on lower body day for that reason. And again, toward the end of the workout, these aren't going to be good primers for your main lifts. They're going to be good finishers for your core as a whole. And then the last exercise that we will be talking about is going to be loaded carries. So these are often, I think for most people are overlooked. For the average person is overlooked. For most people in the functional lifting space, and competitive CrossFit and powerlifting space, they're used very often. But loaded carries are just going to be like farmer's carries and different variations of farmer's carries. But you're putting your body in a position to where it has to hold on to a weight that is compressing your spine, that is pulling you downward. You're going to need to stand tall while you do this. You're going to need to keep your ribcage flexed in. And as you walk, because it's a loaded carry, you're carrying this through a distance. As you walk, you're going to try and maintain this position the entire time. So it's kind of similar to anti-extension and anti-lateral flexion exercises put together, especially if you do like a one-arm farmer's carry where you only have one side loaded and you're trying to resist laterally flexing to that side. But you're just combining all these elements together to strengthen your forearms, strengthen your shoulders, strengthen your entire core section. Your erector spina, your abs, and your obliques are all going to be working when you do a farmer's carry, and a good heavy farmer's carry at that. So these I always like to program at the end of a workout. Occasionally, depending on the person, I'll use it as a primer, but that's very rare. It's always going to be best at the end of a workout to help finish off your body in a nice strong position. So if you had your form compromised at any one point, finishing off with a strong, tall farmer's carry will be a good way to put you in a better postural position the rest of the day after your workout is done, and help you just stay and maintain that position as you go about the rest of your day. So it's a good way to kind of offset anything that you might have messed up on if you lifted too heavy or if your form was compromised. But also on top of that, it's a good way to just stabilize yourself and strengthen yourself to finish off the rest of the day feeling great. So loaded carries, there's going to be a few variations of this. I like to program them by distance. So I will usually say do a heavy farmer's carry for 20 yards, or 10 steps at a time, depending on what their gym setup looks like. If they don't have a space to walk with, I'll usually say steps so that they have a back and forth step count to follow. But there's going to be a few variations. Obviously, the basic farmer's carry where you have 2 dumbbells to your side and you're just trying to walk slowly and with good control is one way to do it. Another way to do it is with an offset carry, like I mentioned, where you have 1 to your side and maybe 1 racked up on your shoulder or 1 directly overhead. And then the last one, I would say, of the 3 variations are going to be double overhead farmer's carry. You won't be able to do as much weight with this, but this is going to be really challenging in terms of managing your anti-extension. Because again, whenever we put our hands overhead, it's very easy for us to extend our rib cage forward and put our spine in that compromised position. If we do a light overhead carry workout and focus on maintaining our rib cage placement downward and avoiding extension of the spine for the entire walk, that's going to translate really, really well into all of our other exercises, as well as our posture and how we walk throughout the rest of the day as well. So recapping, those are going to be all the different ways that you train your core, and different gave you a lot of the most fundamental and foundational examples in terms of exercises and how to include them. Definitely suggest having a variety of these throughout your training program. So don't just have an entire week of just anti-rotation exercises. You want to have at least one of these every single you want to have done at least one of each of these exercises every single week. So 1 loaded carry, 1 flexion-based exercise, one anti-movement exercise, whether that's lateral flexion or anti-rotation, one bracing exercise or anti-extension exercise, and then incorporating diaphragmatic breathing whenever possible, because again, very underrated, but can be a real burner for most people. I always like, again, like I said earlier, using it at the end of a workout to put you in a rest and digest state. I think that's going to be where it's most valuable for a lot of people. But as long as you're doing it, you're going to find a lot of value in it. So hopefully you guys found a lot of value in this episode and found a lot of helpful tips and understandings to core training that you didn't know before. If you have any questions about anything I said or want to know if you're incorporating this properly into your training program, please feel free to email me. I'm here to answer all of your questions whenever they come up. You can email me at Jumha, Jumha, at stupid with 2 O's .fit. Or you can message me on Instagram, handle at stupid.fit. And yeah, so thank you guys for listening and tuning in. If you found this valuable, would definitely highly recommend you check out some of our show sponsors' products, because I find their products valuable as well. And the point of this podcast is to provide you as much valuable value as possible. So check out Strong Coffee Company. I take their coffee multiple times a week, not every single day, but I take it multiple times a week. And then Top Notch Nutrition, I take their supplements every single day. You can follow the links in the show notes to get 15% off at checkout for both of those things and give them a shot. But otherwise, thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.